Hey, what's up, everybody? Jason here. I'd like to continue our series on the theme of exile and empire. The title of this talk is going to be The Death of God. But before we dig in, I want to do a recap, as I always do, and bring us all up to speed concerning what we've seen thus far. We talked last time about this gospel according to Satan, was what I called the talk. We've been seeing that there's a void, there's a lack that we feel within ourselves and within the world. And I've been trying to argue that this lack that we feel is not just a lack in our knowledge, but it's a lack in our very being. In other words, it's not just epistemological. Epistemology refers to knowing, how we know what we know. This lack is not merely epistemological in the sense that, there are certain things that we don't know about the world or about ourselves, but eventually we will. The world, the universe is explicable. It's just a matter of time and tech, and we'll get there. What I've been arguing on the contrary is that this lack, this void, this ambiguity, even this antagonism that we feel within ourselves is ontological. Ontology refers to being, the study of being. And so this void is woven into the fabric of reality itself. It is part and parcel of the way the universe is. It's inherent. It's built in, okay? So you can't avoid the void. It's supposed to be there. That was my point last time. And I even highlighted the fact that the idea that the void can be avoided, you can trace that idea back to the Garden of Eden and to the story of Adam and Eve and the serpent. You remember Adam and Eve were in the garden. God says, you can eat of all the trees, but not of this particular tree. And then the serpent comes along and starts to tempt Eve and says, has God indeed said you shall not eat of every tree in the garden? And Eve said, no, God said we can eat of all of them except this one, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For in the day we eat thereof, we will die. And the serpent says, you will not surely die. But God himself knows that in the day you eat of that tree, you will be like God, knowing good and evil. You will be perfect. You will be complete. The only thing standing in the way of that sacred object that you crave, that sense of wholeness and completeness that you desire, is the prohibition. And so if you can somehow circumnavigate or clear that hurdle, then you will have that sense of completeness, that sense of wholeness that you crave. And we made the connection last time between the fact that the serpent said that, but also every single pulpit in this country says that virtually every single Sunday, at least if it's an evangelical expression of Christianity. The gospel message in this country is, you've been looking for love, joy, peace, fulfillment, lasting happiness. You haven't been able to find it. You've pressed all the buttons: sex, drugs, alcohol, money, power, fame, celebrity, all these things that we crave in our culture, looking for that sacred object, looking for that sense of wholeness and completeness, but you can't find it because you're pushing the wrong buttons on the vending machine, as it were. You're pushing the wrong buttons. The right button is the Jesus button. Push the Jesus button and the vending machine will dispense everything that you desire. Ask Jesus to come in your heart, get baptized, whatever the hurdle is to get that sacred object. This is what the evangelical church, echoing the serpent in the Garden of Eden, preaches as evangelism week in and week out. Furthermore, in the Gospels, fast forward all the way to the time of Jesus, in the Gospels you see Satan tempting Jesus. Jesus goes out into the wilderness to fast for 40 days, and he's tempted by the devil. And essentially the devil offers him a deal. There are a few temptations, but the one that I want to focus on, and we highlighted last time, is where Satan says, the serpent or the devil says to Jesus, here are the kingdoms of the world. I will give these to you. Because they're under my authority. I can give them to you if I want to. All you have to do is worship me, right? In other words, what the devil is saying is, you can have the crown without the cross. You don't have to suffer to get what you want. You can get the resurrection without the crucifixion. You can arrive at Easter Sunday and skip Good Friday altogether, right? And Jesus rebukes the devil, overcomes the temptation. Interestingly, later in the Gospels, when Jesus tells his disciples this very thing, that he must suffer and be delivered over into the hands of wicked men and be crucified, Peter pulls him aside and rebukes him and says, "Lord, far be it from you. Why are you saying this? This will never happen to you. This can't happen to you." And Jesus' response is, "Get behind me, Satan. You are not mindful of the things of God, but of the things of men." And so this idea that the void can be avoided, the difficulty, the struggle can be avoided, and the glory, the crown, the resurrection, Easter, we can get all that the easy way. Jesus attributes that entire way of thinking to the devil, and I am convinced he would probably do the same if he were to go listen to most of our preaching in this country. Exile, as I've been trying to show, is not about triumphalism, okay? The way I'm using exile is in contradistinction to empire. And I'm using exile as shorthand for weak theology, empire as shorthand for strong theology. And I get those ideas from 1 Corinthians 1 and 2, which we're going to get into in this talk. Exile is weak theology. Empire is strong. Empire declares things. It canonizes books. It canonizes people. It defines dogma. It decides what is essential to the faith, what is not. All of that is very strong, muscular theology that exile does not replace with a different set of equally strong proclamations, because that's just a lateral move from one imperial expression of strong theology to a different one. But rather, exile functions more as a posture than a position. And I sort of connected it historically to Jean-Francois Lyotard's famous description of postmodernism as incredulity toward meta-narrative. And so postmodernism is not a different meta-narrative than capitalism or socialism or scientism or Christianity, but rather postmodernism is a sideways glance at all of those ideas, those haughty, lofty, muscular ideas, these meta-narratives, these huge, big stories that swallow up and subsume every other local narrative underneath them. Postmodernism looks at that askance, with side-eye, with suspicion. And that is what exile does to empire, okay? And so it's not about triumphalism, which is why it's very un-American. You know, America is very triumphalistic and very much about, you know, victory and liberty and you know, fighting the battle for our freedoms and all of this, don't tread on me and all this kind of stuff. And that's what we value. That's what we celebrate in our culture, in this country. Exile looks sideways at all of it with suspicion, with a kind of slow blink. You sure about that? Are you absolutely sure about that, really? And that's how exile, that's the posture that it strikes when it comes to strong theology, when it comes to empire, when it comes to imperial expressions of strong theology. And so exile's not triumphalistic, but rather it is a leaning in to the struggle, that void, that antagonism, that ambiguity, that unknowing that's, as I said, woven into the very fabric of life, that is sort of baked into the DNA of the world. Exile leans into that. It doesn't try to avoid it, doesn't try to circumnavigate it, doesn't try to sort of clear it by going around it some other way, but it leans in to the struggle. It derives joy from the bearing of our crosses, right? I mean, that is what Jesus says to his disciples. If you want to come after me and follow me, you must take up your cross. And if you will not take up your cross and strike that posture of a leaning in and a willingness to struggle, then you cannot be my disciple, he says. And so that is what exile does in contradistinction from empire.